Every room you've ever walked into, there was a version of you that shrank to fit it. Quieter opinions. Softer edges. A smaller version of a bigger person. You called it fitting in. It was actually the slow erosion of the one thing that could have made you unforgettable. Here's what nobody tells you: the world doesn't reward sameness. It tolerates it. It rewards the outlier, the anomaly, the person who looks at the room and refuses to match its temperature. Being different isn't a social liability you have to manage. It's the single most undervalued competitive advantage a human being can own, and almost nobody uses it because almost nobody trusts it. These are 7 facts that prove it. Fact 1. Differentiation is the only strategy that can't be copied instantly. In business, in art, in relationships, every advantage you build that looks like someone else's advantage has an expiration date. A better price gets undercut. A clever tactic gets reverse engineered. A trending style gets flooded with imitators within weeks. But a genuine point of difference, a perspective, a voice, a way of thinking that's actually yours can't be copied without becoming a copy. It will always be a step behind the original. Researchers studying market positioning have long noted that companies who compete on being better eventually get beaten by someone who's better. Companies who compete on being different only get beaten by someone who's more themselves, and that's a race no imitator can win. The same law applies to a person's career, a person's art, a person's presence in a room. Sameness is a rented advantage. Difference is owned outright. Fact 2. The brain is wired to notice deviation before it notices quality. Human perception evolved to detect change, not to detect excellence. A predator in tall grass isn't dangerous because it's a high-quality predator. It's dangerous because it doesn't match the pattern of the grass. Your visual cortex, your attention, your memory, all of it is tuned to flag what breaks the pattern before it even processes what's good or bad about that break. This is why a merely different idea often gets remembered longer than a technically superior but conventional one. It's not that audiences are shallow. It's that the human brain is a pattern deviation detector first and a quality judgment machine second. If you blend in, you're asking a system built to notice outliers to somehow notice you anyway. You're fighting your own audience's neurology. Stand out instead, and you're working with it. Fact 3. Every category leader started as the weird option. Look back far enough at any brand, artist, or public figure now considered the standard, and you'll find a moment when they were considered strange, off-putting, or simply wrong for the room. The pattern repeats endlessly across industries: the format that seemed too slow for its audience, the voice that seemed too blunt for its platform, the style that seemed too minimal for its market. In nearly every case, the very trait that made critics uncomfortable early on became the trait that made the eventual leader impossible to replace. This isn't a coincidence, it's a mechanism. Comfortable ideas compete against 100 other comfortable ideas for the same shrinking attention. Uncomfortable but real ideas compete against almost no one because almost no one is willing to sit in that discomfort long enough to launch. Fact 4. Conformity has a measurable psychological cost. Decades of social psychology research going back to classic studies on group conformity show that suppressing a genuine opinion to match a group doesn't just cost you socially. It costs you internally. People who habitually mask their real views or instincts to fit an environment report higher rates of chronic stress and lower reported life satisfaction than people who don't. The mind treats a mismatch between what you show and what you actually think as a low-grade, ongoing threat signal. In other words, blending in isn't the safe option it appears to be. It has a slow, compounding cost that rarely gets built all at once. It gets built daily, in energy, in self-trust, in the quiet fatigue of performing a version of yourself that isn't real. Fact 5. Distinct people are remembered, average people are recalled only by function. There's a difference between being remembered and being recalled. Recall is functional. Someone can retrieve that you exist, what job you do, what category you fall into. Memory is emotional. Someone can retrieve how it felt to be around you, what made you different from every other person in that category. Most people spend their whole lives optimizing for recall, matching the expected resume, the expected tone, the expected presentation. but recall is replaceable. If you're remembered only for your function, you can be swapped for anyone else who performs that function. Distinctiveness is what moves a person from the replaceable category into the irreplaceable one. It's the difference between being an option and being the option. Fact 6. Markets and audiences saturate with sameness far faster than they saturate with difference. When something works, it gets copied fast. A tone of voice, a content format, a business model, a personal brand, once it's proven, a wave of near-identical copies floods in within months. That means the safe, proven, conventional path is actually one of the most crowded, fastest saturating paths available. Meanwhile, the different path, the one specific to how you actually think, speak, and see things, cannot saturate the same way because no one else has access to the raw material. Your specific background, your specific way of framing ideas, your specific instincts, these can't be flooded by copycats because they can't be extracted from you. Chasing sameness puts you in the most competitive lane on the road. Owning your difference puts you in a lane with almost no other cars in it. Fact 7. The people who most resent your difference are the ones most invested in the old average. This is the fact almost no one wants to hear, because it explains the resistance you feel every time you try to stand apart. When you stop matching the room, the people most heavily invested in that room's current standard often push back the hardest, not because you're wrong, but because your difference exposes a choice they didn't make. Your visibility becomes an implicit question about their invisibility. This is why standing out often produces friction before it produces reward. That friction isn't proof you're on the wrong path. In most documented cases of people who eventually broke into a new category or built something no one else had built, the friction phase came first, consistently, before the recognition phase. If you feel resistance the moment you stop blending in, that isn't a warning sign. Historically, it's closer to a leading indicator. So here's where that leaves you. Being different was never the risk. It was the fee, the entry cost for a version of your life, your work, your voice that can't be copied, undercut, or replaced. Sameness feels safe because it's crowded, and crowded feels like safety in numbers. But crowded is also where you disappear. The 7 people, ideas, and brands that actually get remembered in any category are never the ones that blended in best. They're the ones that were willing to be the exception long enough for the exception to become the standard. You don't need permission to be different. You need to stop paying the daily cost of pretending you're not. If this reframed the way you think about standing out, you know what to do. Like this video, subscribe for more, and I'll see you in the next one.